Good morning, everyone. Why don't we get started? It's 8:02, and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Sharon Danosky, and today's webinar will be virtually Hug Your Donors and Keep Them Close, Donor Stewardship, Donor Relations, and Donor Engagement. So thank you again for joining me. I'm Sharon Danosky, president of Danosky Associates, and have been working in the nonprofit sector for almost 40 years, and over the course of my career have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. 16 of those years was as a member of the senior administration for several hospitals, and I was also vice president for a large human service organization. 12 years ago, in 2008, I began my own business, Danosky Associates, to work with small and mid-sized nonprofits and help build their capacities through stronger governance and strategic planning. I'd now like to introduce and thank our hosts, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and Jackie and Stephanie, who are instrumental in bringing us this workshop today. Jackie or Stephanie, would you like to say hello?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us and spending your Thursday morning with us. And I'm looking forward to today's workshop just as much as you are. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. So before we get started, a few housekeeping details. Please mute your mics, and please shut off your video cameras. Excuse me, your video cameras where it says start video, please go to that and please click on there so that your video cameras are also off. It helps prevent distractions for those who are participating. We will answer questions preferably at the end of the webinar, and I will stay longer to address those questions if need be. If I cannot get to your questions or your questions require more context, I invite you to email us at info@danosky.com with your questions, and I will answer them offline as well. Yes, you will receive a copy of the deck, and you will also receive a recording at a later time. I'd like to recognize Juanita Manning, my associate, who is the woman behind the curtain.
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks, Juanita. I'd like to ask each of you to think for a few minutes. How much time do you spend each week nurturing your donors? Not preparing asks, not preparing appeals, not planning events, but about doing nice things for your existing donors. Just be careless. Is it 1 hour, 5 hours, 20 hours, less? If it is less than 5 hours a week, I hope this presentation will convince you to dedicate more time. For close to 20 years now, we've been bemoaning the loss of our donors to our organizations. That is, those who have noticed there is a loss of donors. I say that somewhat facetiously, but there is a truth to it. Because I have worked with many clients over the years, the sad truth is many don't know what their attrition rate is and haven't looked at it. They have been inadvertently creating a revolving door of donors. Donors don't tell you when they go. They just leave. They feel unappreciated, they feel disconnected, they don't know if their money is being put to good use, they don't know if their money is being used as intended. It's not as if they assume it isn't, they just don't know. With all this silence, they quietly leave. They stage their own quiet revolution and go elsewhere. We've created this revolving door of donors because our focus in fundraising has been on asking for money with little time spent on engaging donors, making them part of your organization, creating greater opportunities for involvement, creating a positive donor experience, working with them as partners. there is more interest in acquiring new donors. So often when boards speak about fundraising, they talk about the necessity of getting the word out. We need to find more donors. What can we do so more people will support us? It's seldom, how can we create a better relationship with the donors we have so they will continue to give, grow with us, bring more people into the organization who care about our work as much as they do. Many of you have seen this. It's the donor pyramid. And it always shows that 80 to 90% of your money comes from 10 to 20% of your donors. The most fundraising success comes from the top of the pyramid, right up here. Yet our fundraising is usually focused down here at the bottom. To me, the most important part of this pyramid is this tier right here, donor retention. Because if you don't retain your donors, you cannot cultivate major donors or end up with loyal donors who will leave you a legacy. That is why stewardship and donor relations are such a critical part of the fundraising process, yet the most frequently overlooked. There is a difference between stewardship and donor relations. Stewardship is about taking good care of the gift. Donor relations is taking good care of the donor. Here are the definitions. Frequently, the specific activities related to each may overlap. For example, good stewardship requires you send an acknowledgement stating the amount of the gift and the intended purpose for which the gift is used. Donor relations takes the acknowledgement letter and makes sure it is sincere, gives good information, and invites the donor to learn more. Then goes even further, making phone calls, sending short notes, similar activities, but how you use those activities creates the difference. On average, how long does it take you to get your acknowledgement letter out to your donors once you have received their contribution? When I first entered the field of fundraising, the expectation was 24 hours. An acknowledgement letter needed to be out the door within 24 hours. And back then, you had to type up every letter by hand. There was no such thing as a mail merge. Thank goodness computers came in shortly thereafter. Nearly every donor database gives you the capability of automating your acknowledgement letters so you can get them out quickly. I recognize for some nonprofits where there might only be part-time staff or even no staff, this may not be so doable, but every letter should be out within 48 to 72 hours. Which brings me to the next basic step of stewardship. Every gift needs to be recorded. Not nice to be recorded, must be recorded and tracked with the donor's name, address of some sort, the amount of the gift, and the purpose for which the gift was intended. Unrestricted or maybe designated toward a purpose. If it is a larger gift or a pledge for a campaign, there must be formal gift agreements or a signed pledge agreement documenting the purpose of the gift. Your business and finance office must be notified of the intent of every gift. Now, you can obviously do this in batches, and if you are tracking it in your donor database, then each individual gift doesn't need to be tracked in your financial system as well. However, you should reconcile the two systems every single month. Additionally, you should prepare a report on the use of contributed funds to share with your donors, and occasionally conduct a SWOT audit. Though if you have an independent audit each year, your auditors will do that as a routine cost of doing business. Here are some other ways that you can implement good stewardship practices. An annual report fulfills the need to report on the use of contributions received. Endowment reports can demonstrate the impact of gifts. I've always loved the idea of sending off a letter with a tax receipt to donors every January or February, itemizing all the donor gifts with a nice thank you. I also recommend sending a letter to your donors once or twice a year saying, "This is how we used your money." After the earthquake in Nepal 7 years ago, one international relief organization did that in such a terrific way. They sent out an email to every single person who contributed by mail or online with a letter whose heading read, "Where did the money go?" That's simple. Where did the money go? And it listed everything they spent the money on. Donors were very happy and they continued to give. 71% of donors, 71% said they have much more money to give but are holding back due to fundraising practices. To me, this is an extremely distressing statistic because it could be so easily avoided simply by exercising basic stewardship of a donor's gift. Thank the donor, inform them that the money is being used as intended, then report back how the money was used and maybe share a little bit of the impact it had. Donor relations begins where stewardship leads off. Where stewardship is stewarding the gift, here the emphasis is on the donor. Stewardship is almost like checking off basic things that need to be done. Donor relations is focusing on the person, not the money. Why did that donor make the contribution? What is it about you or what you do or how you reach out to them that made them decide to support you? How did you respond when they made their gift? How did it make them feel welcome, like they wanted to give again? Are you creating an experience for the donor where they feel they are part of your community and part of creating a better world? Can they honestly say, "Yes, I gave $50 and I'm so proud of that organization because they sheltered or fed more people or provided care or learning opportunities for children," whatever your mission is? Do they feel as if you are in this battle together? Or do they feel as if they are on the outside looking in with all the shades pulled down? There are 4 basic pillars of donor relations. And as I mentioned earlier, they can in some way overlap with stewardship practices. Again, stewardship is about the gift, donor relations is about the donor. I will review each of these on the following slides. The first is, do you have gift acceptance policies, and are they printed on your website? Do donors have a clear understanding of what happens when they make a contribution to you? This is what they mean by fundraising practices. I've always liked the phrase, delight your donors. Policies ensure that every donor will be treated consistently with a high standard of quality. It's not okay to wait a month to cash a check. It's not okay not to send an acknowledgement and wait 2 weeks, even if you're a small nonprofit. If someone responded to Great Give 2020, they should be aware that you have a standard with which you will respect every donor, every gift, and honor their contribution. Your donor didn't carelessly make this contribution because they were sitting at their computer and had nothing better to do. Every gift is made with a certain amount of deliberation by your donor. It might have been impulsive in terms of an online gift, but it was not careless or without thought, nor should your acceptance of that gift be. Stewardship is producing an accurate, timely acknowledgement letter, acknowledging the amount given and that the contribution will be put to good use. Donor relations is taking that acknowledgement letter 1 or more steps further. First, it is a warm, meaningful, sincere letter explaining the impact of the gift. Perhaps you can include data which documents how well past gifts have been put to use and ensuring the donor how important their gift is. It might include pictures or useful information, like trails to walk if you are a land trust, or a schedule of virtual concerts, or talks that your organization is holding, or if you're a healthcare organization, about how to keep yourself safe during a pandemic. Maybe you, your board, and staff have had recent discussions about plans for addressing issues of the day. You could share some of that in your acknowledgement letter. One of the best letters I ever ran began simply, "Thank you for remembering on behalf of all those who can't." Good donor relations also means that your acknowledgement letter isn't a one and done. Staff or board members can make thank you calls, write personal notes. And when your donor makes 2 or 3 gifts a year, don't send the same acknowledgement letter every single time. I've seen that happen so much, and I'm like, did they even look at what I did? All that does is show your donor that you have automated your process and they really aren't a person anymore. A well-executed acknowledgement is the first step toward a donor renewing his gift. When you think of it in that context, it holds a lot more weight. Donor recognition is the third pillar of donor relations. When we think of donor recognition, we immediately think of donor walls and plaques and list of names and the mechanics of recognition. I'd like you to think of donor recognition a little bit differently. Think of it as building a community of donors who share your values and your dreams. It can create the means to bind that community together stronger and tighter, one that becomes a meaningful part of the donor's life and social fabric. That's why donor pins and donor gifts can be so strong and meaningful, because they represent belonging to something that the donor is proud of. But it can't be an empty gesture. A pin without the sense of community is just unnecessary ornamentation. As we have been moving to a virtual platform during this pandemic, donors have been gathering in Zoom rooms, getting to know each other a little bit, but more important, hearing about your organization. These meetings have created communities. How can you build on this sense of community and strengthen it? Strengthen it into advocacy and outreach, as well as donor support. These video conferences have become one of the best engagement tools we have seen in literally decades. How to build on that can create a stronger community. As you build your recognition program, remember, it must be a program that heightens the donor's experience and not be a hollow reminder that you have forgotten the person behind the donation. Perhaps the greatest area where we can make a difference in our sector is reporting to our donors, the fourth pillar of donor relations. I am convinced that the focus on administrative overhead over the past couple of decades is because we have not been as forthcoming with how a donor's contribution has been used. In many instances, it's because it's hard to explain. We just do our work. That's what we do. For grant reporting purposes, we develop theories of change and logics models and results-based accountability, which are great, but we have trouble translating those into simple outcomes that people who are not directly engaged in our work can understand. As a result, our donor relations have suffered. It isn't hard. Look again at what happened during COVID-19. What was the outcome donors wanted with their contributions? For you to stay open, which tells me that inherently they know the good work you do, but that won't carry you for the long term. Know your outcomes. Develop 2 or 3 easy to understand outcomes. For example, 100% of the students who attended our schools in grades 1 through 8 graduated high school. 92% of the people with intellectual disabilities in our program are gainfully employed. I think you get the point. Share those and how you did it. Keep it simple. Include it in your acknowledgments, your e-blasts, your annual reports, front and center on your websites. And a couple of times a year, write to your donors only to say, here's what we did with the money you gave us. Thank you. How many of you, I wonder, are familiar with the Donor Bill of Rights? The Bill of Rights was first developed in 1993 by the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Association of Healthcare Philanthropy, the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, and the American Association of Fundraising Council. I remember being part of the team that helped develop this Bill of Rights. It was adopted because, as fundraising professionals, we were concerned about the stewardship of donors, concerned because fundraising practices were not ethical, such as fundraisers receiving a percentage of funds raised as compensation, and that donors' intentions and generosity were not being respected. In more recent years, the concerns are much more fundamental, as we have witnessed an extreme decrease in donor retention. That concern continues today and is evident in the number of donors continuously abandoning charities they have given to. Let your donors know that you subscribe to the Donors Bill of Rights, maybe when they make their first contribution to you, or put it on your website for people to see, and make sure you live up to it. And if you'd like a copy of this, please email me and I'll be happy to send it along to you. Donor engagement is the far more subtle practice of ensuring your donors are having a great experience in giving to your organization. Donor engagement implies a two-way relationship. A donor who is truly involved and interested in what you're doing naturally gives more, and they give in good times and bad. During good times, donors give to many charities. However, and this is an important thing to remember, in more difficult times, they are far more selective and only give where they feel the strongest connection. That is why when there are economic downturns, there are some nonprofit organizations that do just fine and even increase their contributions because they have built that relationship with that donor who stops giving to those many organizations and gives what they can only to their top 3 or so organizations. To create that situation requires a culture of philanthropy throughout your entire organization, from board members through your frontline staff people, all recognizing the value of that donor. Your donors are integral to your organization's success and therefore should be considered as part of the team. Donor engagement does not happen magically. It's a concentrated effort that builds over time. And is the result of a process, a sequence of fundraising activities we like to call the 5 I's. Identify, inform, interest, involve, and invest. The first I means you should know who your donors are, because you can't build a stewardship plan without understanding your donor categories, and those who give significant gifts. Once identified, how are you keeping them informed? What are your basic stewardship and donor relations activities? Beyond that, you need to keep the donor's interest. The first step is finding out what they're interested in. I love asking donors questions such as, how did you learn about us? What made you decide to make your first contribution? What about our mission touches you? Once you understand what they care about, you can involve them in a whole host of ways, from discussions on Zoom to volunteering, and even, particularly with your larger donors, seeking their advice and input. I can't tell you how many times over the course of my career, I picked up the phone, called a donor, and said, "Hey, I had this idea and I just wanted to run it past someone. Do you mind listening?" It just strengthened that relationship. Or I might call and say, "Oh my gosh, I just have some wonderful news for our organization. You're going to get the e-blast, but I just wanted to call you and tell you because I knew how happy you'd be." It's not hard. It's genuine. It's treating your donors as if they're friends and family. People always welcome the opportunity to share their opinion or hear good news. This past week, the Supreme Court just made a momentous decision for the LGBTQ community. Have any of you working in this space called your donors and said, "Wow, how do you think we can build on that decision?" That's what it means to involve a donor. And involvement leads to investment. All of a sudden, your donor isn't just writing you a check at the end of the year. They're engaged. They are telling you of other people you should call, or hosting a meeting on their own, or writing congressmen, or any other host of possibilities that show that your cause is their cause. And then their support can be transformational. But you have to go through all of the 5 I's to get there. Know your donors. This step is so critical. You can't bypass it and expect to have a strong stewardship and donor relations program. Good fundraising is work. You need to do the work. Donors are not merely data points in your donor database. There's so much more than that. For any of you who have truly implemented a major gifts program, you know the hardest part of that program was identifying your real major donors. This is work that is so essential to building a donor development plan. For purposes of engagement, donors can be categorized into different groups where you can employ specific strategies. With major donors, that top 20% of your donors who give you 80 or 90% of your dollars, you need to develop individualized plans for each donor. How frequently to contact them, how to contact them, what information to share, what means to share that information. This should be based on research and what you can learn about these donors. These are the donors you are calling, seeking advice, sharing good news, all very personally. Mid-level donors and even small donors also warrant a strategy. It cannot be as specific or personalized as a major donor, but it should be well thought out and strategic. A mid-level donor is that next tier down from a major donor. Some organizations consider donors who give $250 or more as falling into this category, because when a donor gives $250, studies have shown that it's a tipping point, an indication that they are thinking of you as their charity. And then new donors should feel welcomed when they make that first gift. How well they are treated will determine whether or not they come back. The average nonprofit loses 90% of their first-time donors. 90%. You know how much work it takes to bring in a new donor. Don't lose them. And finally, legacy donors, those with long giving history, these are the people most likely to leave you in their wills. But not if you don't know them or talk to them. Have a written plan for each segment. Donors do not come one size fits all. Developing strategies for each donor category while focusing on individual strategies for major donors will breathe new life into a development program. This is the work you do now when you can't have an event, when those events are being put on hold, invest the time in donor stewardship and engagement. There are 3 different ways you can think about donor engagement. The first is one-to-one. One-to-one is how you engage your best donors, those who support you most consistently and most generously. You need to make a super effort with these donors. One-to-some are strategies for your mid-level donors. One-to-many are the strategies you apply consistently and across the board. I'm going to start with the one-to-many. This is for every donor, whether they gave online through Great Give 2020, event donors. The basics for this engagement are those of good stewardship and donor relations. 1, timely, sincere acknowledgments. 2, regular e-blasts sharing meaningful information about the work of your nonprofit and how it was made possible through your donors' generosity. 3, sending out letters once or twice a year, letting the donor know how you used their money and the impact it had. And 4, invitations to video conferences of interest that make the donor feel part of a larger community. Engagement of one-to-many also has a subset, that of new donors. How many of you send out a welcome package of any kind to new donors? The Great Give 2020, which was just sponsored by the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, was a huge success, raising 3 times as much money as the year before. And I'm willing to bet many of you received support from many new donors. Now you should be thinking of what will make them come back. Did you send an acknowledgement in addition to the perfunctory receipt they received when they made the gift? That, by the way, is not an acknowledgement. That's a receipt. Do they know how much money your organization raised during the event? Do they know what you're doing with those funds? Do they know how to engage with your organization if they want to? What are the different activities open to them, virtually or in person? Are there opportunities for them to volunteer? Did you make them feel welcome, a part of a community that cares about your organization? Or will they slip quietly through your revolving door? How would you like to be welcomed as a donor? What would you like to get? You should do that for all your new donors. Establish a standard routine on how you will welcome new donors. Make it simple. Systemize it. Put it on automatic pilot to be reviewed and updated annually. Consistent and automatic good stewardship and donor relations is how you will keep all your donors coming back. These statistics really surprised me. Only 8% of nonprofits made a personal thank you. Only 31 of communications came from a real person, and the one that really blew my mind was 49% of nonprofits sent nothing at all or stopped communicating after 1 month. Now, I think a lot of this is about time allocation, and that stewardship and donor relations has not traditionally been seen as a priority. Certainly, if you are planning numerous events a year, and I work with a lot of organizations who plan 3, 4, 5 events a year, there isn't much time. And if you're an organization primarily run by volunteers, then it's hard to make this a routine. However, it is critical that stewardship and donor relations are embedded into your organization's culture, from your board to your frontline workers. This is where you are obligated to spend time. By the way, it's not a good allocation of time when you're always chasing new donors either. It is far more costly to chase new donors than to do the few things that will keep your donors coming back. Here are some simple, basic things you can do to better communicate one to some. Call these donors and thank them when you receive the gift. If you can't have staff, then make board members do the calls. Send a personal note. You can have note cards made up in advance. Give them to your board members. Send them a list via email of 5 members to write a note to each month. Note the date of every donor's first contribution and send them a card thanking them and how important their gift was to you. They call this donoriversary cards. Find ways to recognize donors. A special thank you video conference call for all donors who gave in the past 6 months. Recognize them in an e-blast on your website. There are many different options. Get creative. You can even do a text check-in. The key is to systematize it so that it automatically occurs and doesn't have to be reinvented every single time. Your one-to-some donor communications largely is targeted at mid-level donors. Mid-level donors will hopefully become major donors. Begin the preparation for the one-to-one communications early in the process, and it'll be a lot easier to move into that one-to-one communication. The best place to start is by finding out what donors want. To do that, you can survey them. When a board member or staff makes a call to the mid-level donor, instruct them to ask a couple of questions and get back to you with the answers, such as, why did you make your first contribution to us? What interests you about our mission? What would you like to know about us? This begins to build the relationship that ultimately results in a strong investment in your organization. How many of you have been using Zoom meetings to engage your donors, either as a group or individually? So this is actually about Zoom meetings and how to engage them. I don't know if any of you have seen the, you can go to Llama or something like that, where you can actually rent a llama to show up at your Zoom meeting. I think it's a very cute idea. Probably only if llamas are somehow engaged in your mission. I don't recommend doing this as a routine. But these Zoom meetings are a great way of keeping donors updated. They can be used to engage new donors, major donors, legacy donors. Simply give updates or bring in expert speakers with interesting topics. Use them judiciously and strategically. Keep the format simple. Don't invite too many if you want feedback and discussion. Or you can simply push information out. Keep it short. 20 to 30 minutes, I think, works best, but always less than 45 minutes. We have relatively short attention spans, as you all know. If donors have contributed to a special project, let them know how it's going. This is a great way to give updates if you're in a capital campaign. Legacy donors can hear about tax planning alternatives. Target the time of your meeting to what would be convenient to the donors you are trying to reach, not convenient to you. And use a large virtual meeting when you have an important announcement. And as I said, you can even invite a llama if it's appropriate in some way to your mission. One-to-one engagement should be reserved for your most generous and loyal donors. If you are a small shop with 1 or no people in development, then this should be a relatively small number, and your board members should be enlisted to help. These are the donors who will be making those investments. Seek their input, their advice, and call them just to share what you may be thinking. Enlist them as part of your team. You want these donors to feel like trusted advisors and good friends. This is the ultimate donor engagement. I could give an entire webinar or two simply on engaging major donors. Suffice it to say, they should be part of your systemized and structured process to stewardship and donor relations. I wanted to just kind of give you an example here of how the 5 I's relate to the donor engagement activities. Sometimes I feel we use these different diagrams and how do they all fit together? Nearly everything in development is a process and can be structured. You can do it, count it, check it off. I know that sounds contrary to developing relations with donors. The relationships come when you have all the steps in place. If you have to invent it every single time, then you don't have the time to personally engage. The personal relationship comes about because of how you make the phone call, how sincere you are, how you send a card when someone is sick or have celebrated a milestone. This is why development work is often referred to as both a science and an art. There are certain things you must be sure to do and when you must do them, and then the relationships emerge. Without this process, it's basically chaos in a can. This is a sheet that can be used to track touch points when you want to engage specific major donors. Again, it goes to process and structure. Moves management was first conceived by 2 outstanding fundraisers at Cornell University. Buck Smith was a major gifts officer, and David Dunlop was a vice president for advancement. Buck carried a large portfolio. I think he carried somewhere between, he told me at one point he had as many as 400 to 450 major donors that he stewarded. And in his early days, there was no computer. He tracked his donors using a card filing system. And he wanted to develop a way where he could see all his donors and move them through a process of engagement and transformational giving. So David, the vice president, and he developed the Moves management system for tracking donors. Every single major donor was listed, assigned a primary solicitor and a secondary partner. For a smaller nonprofit, the primary solicitor is probably the development director or executive director, and the secondary partner is a board member. Strategies were then developed for each donor. When would they be taken to dinner? When would they be invited to campus? When did they get a birthday card? When did they get acknowledgement of their, anniversary gift to the organization? When would you ask them for an annual gift? In what ways would you thank them? All of this was plotted out throughout the year. The first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, the fourth quarter. None of it was left to chance. Universities still work this way, though it's no longer on index cards. So should you work this way if you want to build a strong fundraising plan? It is structured, yet leaves plenty of opportunity for personalization. The easiest way to implement this process is to actually build out and document a stewardship and donor relations plan. Embed the program within the protocols of your development office. Create the structure and systems that will allow you to manage it seamlessly. Assign specific positions in the department or in the organization for managing different aspects of this process. This means creating a culture of philanthropy that says, this is how we treat our donors. If you treat stewardship and donor relations with the same care you have planned your appeals and your events, you will reap as many and even more rewards. Thank you has always been recognized as the most powerful motivator. And that is really what this is all about, saying a sincere thank you to your donors. I know this is hard to read, but I wanted to share with you this spreadsheet that actually outlines the stewardship communications plan over the course of a year. It's broken down by donor category. So on the far left, these are your tactics: an acknowledgement letter, a thank you phone call, a new donor welcome package, a handwritten thank you note, a personal visit, a video clip update, individually sending videos, sending out a donor interest survey. All of these are the tactics. So when you're developing something like this, you really want to think about, what are the tactics? What are the tools at my disposal that I can use to better communicate with donors? The next column is the steps. What step is needed? Acknowledgement letter, you got to prepare the letter. If you want someone to make a thank you phone call, you need to provide the phone numbers, and so forth. And then you need to identify who is responsible. In this plan, I highlighted where board members needed to play a role. Next, you look at when. Within 24 hours, within 1 week, within 2 weeks, twice a year, once a year, quarterly. And the final is major donors, sponsors, mid-level donors, new donors, non-donors. Using a form like this makes it easier to implement and manage. This should be someone's job to see that all these elements are carried through. You might not need all these steps. Create your own plan. Make it workable for your organization. Make sure that you can carry out every single thing on this plan consistently. If your plan is only half this long, but you carry out everything on your plan routinely and consistently, and you are reaching all of your donors a couple of times a year, that's what matters. I am happy to share this plan with you as a template if you'd like it. So again, just email me and let me know. You've heard me mention creating a culture of philanthropy several times throughout this presentation. Again, another whole webinar. But what does culture of philanthropy really mean? It means building a culture by cultivating the understanding that fundraising is core to your organization's ability to fulfill your mission. And if you believe that, then you will do everything you can to value and safeguard those contributions and the people who make them. Effective organizations embrace a culture of philanthropy. Each volunteer and every employee feels it. Clients and donors recognize it whenever they connect with the organization. It isn't easy. There are challenges. Staff doesn't have the time. Other departments don't understand what the development office does. There are insufficient systems to support stewardship as it should be supported. But when there's a culture of philanthropy in an organization, everyone understands and embraces the donors as integral to the organization's success. Everyone in the organization, from frontline to volunteers to chair of the board, values the donor and the part they play. Think about it. If we could make that happen, how different our organizations and the role of stewardship would be. We need to change the conversation and value our donors and show them how truly cherished they are. I say it's time to begin. The past 6 months have shown us some new paths we can take. We have seen some extraordinary generosity. The Great Give 2020 in New Haven raised $3.6 million Nearly 18,000 donors gave to 398 organizations. Giving Tuesday now raised $503 million nationally, just 6 months after they raised $511 million for Giving Tuesday in December. What will we do with these donors? Send a perfunctory receipt? Don't communicate for a full year and then bombard them next year with multiple requests to give again? Or will we treat them like the valuable people they are? Think about what you can do and the difference you can make. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'd now like to open it up for questions in the chat box. Please type them there and I will try to get to all of them. Or email me, and let me show you where to email me at info@danosky.com. And, I will be happy to respond. Thank you, Jackie, Stephanie, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and thank you for all the work you do to make our world a better and more just society. We all have much work to do. We rely on our donors to make it possible. So continue bringing hope and joy to so many in the world. We are all in this together. Thank you.